If you ask people, nobody has, I want to be happy on the goal list for the year. We think this is a fluffy, irrelevant topic. In fact, if you listen to the public discourse on happiness, people will tell you, oh no, don't strive to be happy. Strive for a meaningful life, strive for this, strive for that, but just not to be happy. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, if you want to be healthy, you have to work on your health. If you want to have good relationships, you have to work on your relationships. Why is it if you want to be happy and everybody wants to be happy, you should not work on this? How is it going to happen out of the blue?
The Tom Screen podcast is owned and made possible by Ethical Marketing Service. If your business is struggling with Google or Facebook ads, maybe you're frustrated figuring it out or there's a performance issue, Ethical Marketing Service has worked on hundreds of accounts and we can help in this area. We offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, and for every direct account we look after, we sponsor a child in a developing nation with food, water and education. If you would like to find out if we can help, it's a free, no salesy consultation call, and the link is in the description. Enjoy the episode. Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Kristina Mand-Lakhiani. Kristina, welcome.
Thank you, Thomas, for having me.
You're very welcome. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, talking about yourself is such a wonderful topic, isn't it? So I wonder how little is little and how much is too much. So officially, like a very short bio, I'm a co-founder of Mindvalley, probably the world's biggest transformational platform, educational platform. I'm an author and a speaker and a writer, and then a lot of other things. But that's a very short version. If you want longer, just let me know.
Well, there's something to ask you about there for sure. In terms of what your passion is, what you enjoy talking about, what springs to mind for you there?
Well, definitely what I talk about with greatest pleasure is self-love. Well, it's such a good topic, and also it's such a misunderstood topic. But I love to talk about anything. In fact, I sometimes love talking to people who disagree with me because it's really stimulating and makes you wonder and ask more questions and learn and develop. So I can talk about anything. Pretty much. But since I'm the guest and you would like to talk about my topic, then self-love it is.
Okay. Well, you said it was misunderstood. So I'm interested to know what do people get wrong about that?
Well, probably the most common question that I get when I talk about self-love is when is it too much? When does self-love turn into being self-obsessed or selfish? Another big misconception about self-love is that it can lead to complacency or to indulgence. And it's misunderstood because all those expressions of what may seem like an excess of self-love are in fact distortions of it, and in fact are usually the result of lack of self-love. So it is a misunderstood topic. It is often taken very lightly, and I've even been asked, but isn't a healthy dose of self-criticism good for you? Isn't being discontent with what you are good for you? Well, what I talk about is actually going deep into all those concepts and demystifying. I think our problem is in us as a society, as a human society. Lack of self-love, I think, is the biggest problem of contemporary society, because most of troubles that happen to us, whether it's violent conflicts or the way we treat our planet Earth from overconsumption, they all come as a result of lack of self-love. So we either compensate for its lack, or we try to fill the gap with all the wrong ways, or in a very primitive example, put down others so that we feel better ourselves. This all comes from the lack of self-love, from misunderstanding of self-love, and the fear that you might love yourself too much, or you might love yourself in the wrong way. Only shows one thing: we as a society haven't talked about it. We don't understand what self-love really is.
Well, you ended on an interesting point there, because I was going to ask about, you've given it some thought. So what's the definition? How would you explain that word in terms of what it means?
Wow. I have never given it. It's so funny, isn't it? You just caught me in a very tricky situation, because I do talk about self-love a lot. I love to talk about that, but I've never given it a definition, because it seems like such an self-explanatory thing, and a lot of the misconceptions come when we look deeper into the phenomenon of self-love. But I would say that, first of all, we don't have an appropriate word for love per se, because we very often, when we use the word love, we are not sure, are we talking about the romantic type of love, the love which is unconditional, or the generic superficial type of love which we tend to feel towards whole of humanity. And when love is turned onto yourself, it becomes particularly tricky. So I don't dare to give a definition like this on the go, but I guess I'll spend the next few weeks thinking about it because I've never been asked this question. But what I will say is, I think your relationship with the world is a reflection of your relationship with yourself. So while I'm not able to define self-love right now in this episode, what I am able to define is, if you have issues with your environment, with your surroundings, with the world, to the extent that you have issues with yourself. And that brings me back to the same idea. If we were at peace with ourselves, we'd actually leave the world at peace as well, and we'd have less problems, less conflicts, and humanity would be in a better place.
So it takes us nicely onto, as someone who has some experience in, let's say, reflecting on this topic, how good would you say that you are at the topic of self-love, like for yourself?
I think I'm quite okay. That doesn't mean that I am not occasionally mean to myself. We all are, more than we would like to admit. It's, you see, so I've written a book called Becoming Flawesome. So I'm not a huge fan of perfectionism, although I am a perfectionist, never recovering perfectionist. So I'm not looking for perfection and self-love. I'm looking into intention. And my intention is to be my biggest support and to always be on my own side. And I know it might sound wrong, but it doesn't bother me that it might sound wrong. But we really need to go deeper into understanding why I say that there is no such thing as too much self-love, and why I promote it so much. To actually accept the idea that I want to be my biggest support. I want to be my biggest, I always want to have my side. And again, that doesn't mean that I won't change or I won't admit that I'm wrong. You see, that's another distortion of self-love. You might be afraid to say, I want to always have my corner or to always be on my side, because you think that that will make you stuck in your opinions. But we are stuck in our opinions exactly because we don't have enough self-love. So we think that if we admit that we are wrong, we are not worthy of love. That's why very often we are pig-headed and unwilling to change or unwilling to to admit mistakes, because we are trained from childhood that love needs to be earned. And we do that to ourselves. We actually, when we're children, we know that you have to behave well so that your parents are happy with you and they love you. You have to study well and be a good student so that your teachers love you. We learn that love needs to be earned. And the moment you misbehave, love is taken back. And because our peers often use love as a currency, we grow up knowing that to love yourself, you need to earn it. And we keep that thing going. And I think that's a huge tragedy, because we are never going to be perfect. No one is ever going to be perfect. All it does is, when basically what happens is that if my idea of perfection is very far away from reality, this gap between the idea of what is perfect me or perfect world or perfect happiness or perfect love versus the reality, if this gap is unbearable, I'm going to fill it with all sorts of stories and delusions and all sorts of tricks, so that I can actually accept the fact that my reality is very different from what I'm striving for. and that actually leads us to a very dark place where we are not even aware of what it is to be you, what is the real you. When was the last time you saw the real you? And I'm not talking about you directly, of course. But yeah, I went on a long rant about self-love and how it's never too much.
That was interesting to reflect on. In terms of what a healthy amount, I say healthy amount because I've got that thing in my head, which is like, you don't want to do it too much. It's in the back of my mind there. But how does it look in terms of how would someone be with themselves or treat themselves if they did have self-love?
My favorite measuring stick of self-love is love for children. I'm lucky to have children and to actually love them unconditionally. I don't think, well, first of all, not everybody has children, and not everybody loves their children, unfortunately, as horrible as it may sound. But whenever I'm in doubt, I ask myself, would I treat my child this way? Because really, when I got children, that's when I learned the idea of unconditional love, where I'm willing to do anything and to put them first and to make sure that they're safe, and well, they're safe. Basically, that's as much as I can give them, because their happiness is not in my hands. Whenever in doubt, I ask myself, would I treat my child this way? That's my measuring stick for healthy self-love. Now, when it comes to too much, why I say that selfishness, self-obsession is not a surplus of self-love. Because in essence, what self-obsession or selfishness means is when you expect the world to admire you, you actually suck up the love from your environment because you don't have enough in you. So if I don't have enough in myself, enough love, I need that approval from other people. I need them to tell me that I'm lovable because I can't give it to myself. So it's similar to, I have a bottle here. Unfortunately, it's empty already because I've been drinking the water. But let's say if love is the water in this bottle, you can only pour it from outside if it has emptiness. So if your self-love is the water in the bottle, the moment you have it full, you can't pour anything from the outside. You start pouring, it will start overflowing. So that's the idea for me, that there is never enough. There is never too much, not enough. Enough, there is enough self-love, but there's never too much. Because if you have enough, you will share it to the world. If you don't have enough, you will start sucking it up from the world.
It's a great answer. It's a really interesting concept as well. Does the Flawesome concept, is that interlinked or is it separate?
So Flawesome is about embracing your imperfections, because that's probably one of the reasons why we struggle with self-love, is because we can't face our imperfections. We can't come to peace with them. So a crucial piece of learning to love yourself is learning to love your flaws. I like to call them dragons because it's more visual. And I think we all have those dragons in the dungeons of our castles. They are somewhere in the corners where we never go, and we try to ignore that they're there. So the main message of the book is that you have to come to peace with your dragons, or with your flaws, with your imperfections, and learn to love yourself, not despite your dragons, but with them, and maybe even for them, because it is very often the things that we are ashamed of that hold our greatest value for the world, in fact. Because imagine if everybody was perfect. It would be a pretty scary environment, a pretty scary society. It's very often from our mistakes, from our pain, from our failings, where we get that value that we later have to share with the world.
Yes, overcoming some of those adversities, which gives them value, I suppose. Would you say that's right?
Yes, it's another interesting topic, because we have this simplified version of, once you fail, you get up and then you become better, coming back stories and whatnot. But that's unfortunately not the case. And very often pain doesn't guarantee growth. Not at all. If that was the case, we'd be surrounded by beautiful people, because we all suffer. Every single human being on this world suffers. I'm actually loosely quoting one of our authors. He's a Buddhist monk, so he uses the word suffering, but we can put it into everyday life terms. We all have our struggles and our pains. So it's not really the question of being in pain from time to time per se. It's a question of, does it make you better or does it make you worse? So let's say if you have a wound, it can heal beautifully, but it can also scar, and scar is this thicker tissue. So very often when a person is hurt, they don't become better, unfortunately. They grow maybe a thicker skin or build a wall. And if you look, of course, maybe movies is not a very good example, but they do represent some ideas of real life. Usually the biggest villains are the people who have been through a lot of pain. Well, Darth Vader is the first one that comes to mind. But even in real life, hurt people hurt people. So pain per se is not a guarantee of growth and becoming better. I think that transformation is a sign of healing. It's when you heal from your pain, that's when you become better. So yeah, I don't really talk in my book or in my teachings about the experience of hurting so much. I do talk more about the parts of you which are so in you that you might not even remember where they came from or what triggered or where they came, how did they even start. So I'm talking about the things that make us shrink or feel ashamed, and facing those sides, and facing those dragons, and finding place in your heart for them.
Is this something that you had to go through yourself and you're helping other people with?
That as well, but I wouldn't take my own experience for it. So, for example, when I was writing a book, whenever I made a statement, I would say, okay, wait a minute, is that Kristina fact or is that actually a fact? And then I'd go and research if there's any, and look for research that proves that this is the case. For example, I said once that, oh, women are more critical. Turns out we are more critical than men when it comes to appearance, at least. So I definitely have had this experience, but I've also lived a fairly long life in close connection with people in my life, whether it's my parents or my children, and I take everything as a study. So my personal experience was probably not as dramatic as it might seem, but I am a perfectionist, as I said, and I'm ambitious, hyper-achieving person. So by the age of 40, I had built the successful life by definition of society. You actually wanted to ask me about success. So I had it Instagrammable, perfectly Instagrammable, husband, 2 children, a boy and a girl, not just any 2 children, a boy and a girl, and a job that I loved, traveling the world, partying, costume parties, like celebrities, whatnot. And still I felt, when I had the courage to be honest with myself, something was off. So what triggered my journey of self-discovery was not the fact that I was not feeling happy in my achievements, but the fact that I felt ashamed for not feeling happy. So it was not so much the pain that I was experiencing, but the fact that I couldn't accept it, that I thought that it was wrong to feel it. And I thought that something was wrong with me, and that I can't afford it, because the better version of me wouldn't do this. And that's what triggered my journey of transformation. So as I said, it's not terribly dramatic, but it did make me ask a lot of questions. And unfortunately, path back to yourself is a one-way journey. It's like jumping out of the plane. Once you're out, you can't pack up your parachute and go back. So once I started asking questions and poking my nose in the darker corners of my dungeon, there was no turning back. And I love to quote, and I'm sorry for quoting Lord of the Rings, but there's this little dialogue where I think it's either Frodo or Bilbo, which would be actually the Hobbit, but one of those characters says to Gandalf, "Can you promise me that I'll be back?" And Gandalf says, "No, and even if you are, you won't be the same old Hobbit." And that's the tricky thing. Once you go on the path of self-discovery, you might be okay, but your life might not actually fit you anymore.
And
And you might
if
be
I follow
discontented.
up on this, is it spoilers to ask about, what did you learn or how did you change? Is that,
Oh, yes. I took a sledgehammer and smashed everything into pieces. It's not spoilers. A lot of things changed. Yes. First I took a sabbatical because I did like all the other people do. I fixed everything, but I fixed everything except the important things. Because it's so cool to keep yourself busy with less scary tasks, which are also important. And avoid the scary things. So I first took sabbatical. I used to do a lot of marketing before, but then I realized that was not making me happy anymore. So I've discovered the writer part in me, which actually opened up the doors to me becoming a speaker and an author and a lot of other things, which I enjoy so much more. I've rethought a lot of my life. But I think the painful change that happened was that we separated with my husband. We have a beautiful relationship right now, but it was a painful experience. And that was the one which I was most scared of.
Well, thank you for sharing it. In terms of your, let's say, favorite chapter of the book, is there anything that springs to mind there?
Yes, I love so just for the context, you know how people can make fun of themselves, but not of others. So because I've been in personal growth for 20 years, I like to take, sorry for the expression, take a piss at our industry. So I believe I've put a lot of work into forming some part of it. So I occasionally take a very sarcastic look at some of the things. So my favorite chapter probably is called The Weapon of Love, where I talk about spiritual bypassing.
Okay. Well, I haven't heard that term before. So what does that mean?
So spiritual bypassing is an umbrella term which unites quite a lot of mechanisms which are called defense mechanisms in psychology. But the term was coined by, he's a writer and an author and also a Buddhist monk from US. He coined the term spiritual bypassing. So how he, I actually don't remember, it's Thomas Wellwood, I think. I'm a little bit vague on the name, but I think it's Thomas Wellwood. He coined the term spiritual bypassing and explained it where you hide behind spiritual concepts to not deal with the painful emotions in your life or with the painful situations and circumstances in your life. Again, I'm using it a little bit loosely right now, the quote. But basically, if you're more into psychology and less into spiritual lingo, then in psychology, it's called defense mechanism. So what it means is that if you're facing an emotion that you're not ready to embrace or even admit that you have it, like, for example, if you're in personal growth and you are a huge advocate of love and acceptance and tolerance, and then you meet someone who really triggers you, and you might feel displeasure or anger or even rage towards that person, but being in spiritual niche, you might not admit that this emotion is something that you are capable of feeling because you're a spiritual person who's spent years working on becoming a better human being. So what happens is that when we feel this kind of contradiction or cognitive dissonance, where what you feel is not something that you're willing to accept, you start filling that gap with all sorts of coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms, how they're known in psychology. A very illustrative example would be if a loved person dies and you hear the news, your first reaction might be denial. It can't be happening. Or let's say a slightly less dramatic, when COVID started, a lot of us denied or distorted the reality, thinking that this is something very maybe short-term and will pass and it's not serious. And, in the very beginning, we might not have realized that it will take years for the humanity to maybe move on. So I just mentioned two coping mechanisms or defense mechanisms. One is denial, when you deny, and of course you'll get out of that and eventually you'll accept the fact. The other one is distortion, where you might actually distort the reality so that it's more palatable. And there are loads of those coping mechanisms. So spiritual bypassing is an umbrella term to them, and it actually only refers to using coping mechanisms in the spiritual context or spiritual teachings and learnings. So some of the defense mechanisms in psychology are not, strictly speaking, spiritual, so they wouldn't go under that umbrella.
What made that your favorite chapter?
Because it's unexpected. I'm in this industry for a long time, and people sometimes don't expect me to say something like this.
Because you're supposed to have done all that work. Is that what you mean?
I am generally not a very hard person on other people, especially when it's in teaching. In private life, it's different, probably. I do not know. But in teaching, I'm not a huge fan of tough love idea. So I generally don't make people feel bad about what they are, but I do ask them questions which may lead them on that path. So that's the only chapter where I'm a little bit more transparent and I can actually say directly that this is not cool.
Okay, that's interesting. So the part which is bordering on tough love, or maybe leads them down a path they don't want to go to, is your favorite chapter.
It's not tough love. I'm not saying it out of love. I'm saying it out of frustration, out of being on the receiving end of spiritual bypassing, because it's not really. So you see, defense mechanisms are bad for you from psychological point of view, because you distort your reality, you lie to yourself through applying those defense mechanisms. You don't deal with the issue at hand. Spiritual bypassing actually turns it from your relationship with yourself to relationship with the world, and it's very often harmful to your environment, because what it does is that it leads to dismiss other people's feelings. For example, why are you so dramatic? You're not, or the favorite term of contemporary society for first world problems, positivity, good vibes only, and so on. So you dismiss other people's experiences, feelings, very often hiding behind high concepts of spirituality. It often justifies suffering. It often turns the tables, and you refuse to take responsibility. Like, I do not know if you've experienced that. I've experienced that many times. Oh, but I only have love for you. And you feel almost, you feel scared of hearing that phrase in certain circumstances. If you feel that something is off and you say, hey, do you have a problem with me? And the person tells you, no, I only have love for you. I love everyone. That's when the tables turn, and the person, rather than taking responsibility that, yes, there's a conflict, and that doesn't make you a bad person, another person a bad person, it kind of withdraws your responsibility. Oh no, but I only have love. You're the one who is dramatic. So because I've been on the receiving end of spiritual bypassing, so I can't say that I wrote that chapter out of huge love, although Neil Donald Walsh would say that everything is done out of love. I think I wrote it out of pain.
Well, thank you for sharing that again. And I must admit, I've been guilty of using that term. That sounds like a first world problem. And as you say, not acknowledging the feelings that person perhaps has. Is there a better phrase that you'd replace that with?
Well, that's such an interesting conversation, because it does depend on circumstances. So the question is, if somebody is, my initial reaction to that would be, who am I to judge? So if somebody shares something that I can't relate to, I wouldn't normally point out that their problems is something that I don't relate to and I don't know how to comment. But if they ask me for opinion, I might say that, unfortunately, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I haven't thought about that. So I guess my position is more like, who am I to judge? I don't want to tell people, do they have the right for this experience or not? But sharing other people's feelings and empathy is actually another very interesting topic. We are not taught proper empathy. So very often when we hear a problem, especially not just the problem that we can't relate to, but the problem that we maybe can relate to, we are tempted to go into, oh yeah, I know how you feel, or oh, let me share my own experience where I felt similar thing to you. So we're not really taught proper empathy. And if you take it into extreme, we're not taught how to witness other people's sadness and grief or anger. And we're very uncomfortable with other people's uncomfortable emotions or painful emotions. So when it comes to first world problems or problems that I don't relate to, and I judge people too. I just don't. I mean, I'm human like everybody. Sometimes there's pleasure in judging other people. You feel better. Like, look at you, I'm so much better than you. But that aside, I attempt not to express my judgment to people's face, because who am I to judge? Maybe what they share with you is their last drop. We don't know what was their story. Maybe it is a very serious problem for them because they have a trauma that triggers. I'm sometimes triggered by very strange things, which other people might think not a big deal. But if they don't know why, what kind of pain triggers intense reaction in me to something which might, for example, I really dislike when people tell me, relax. It creates a completely opposite reaction. And we had this chat with my mom recently, and she said, no, but that's a supportive saying. In my opinion, it's an aggressive saying. So you might judge me for being emotional or I don't know, dramatic, but without knowing why do I react this way to it? You know, who am I to judge other people? So since I don't know why they express themselves the way they express themselves, I have literally just two choices. One choice is, if it's unpleasant to me and it triggers me, remove myself from the situation and not listen to that kind of whining and complaining. Or another choice, if I do want to be helpful, is to try to find out, why do you feel this way? Why does it upset you so much? Try to understand the person. But judging them is not my job. And here I would like to encourage people to see a movie, Wonder, because it's such a beautiful movie, which exactly shows how we don't know the full picture usually before we judge someone. And once we know the full picture, sometimes our attitude to that situation or to that person changes.
Yeah, 100% agree. Coming back to the book for a second, is it the third book that you've written? Is that correct?
Oh, well, I've written a lot, probably worth of 10 books, but it's my first book baby. I have created 3 programs, actually 4 by now, 4 programs, which are book volume, but it's my first book, like real book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations for that.
Thank you. Yes, I'm excited to release it to the world. I can't wait for it.
Are you proud to become an author?
It's good. It's a good question. It will expose me. So since I'm in personal growth and transformation for 20 years, of course, I've always thought that I have to become an author. It's like, you know, those goals that we all have, without even questioning. So I've always known that I have to write a book, but my greatest pleasure and pride is not in the fact that I have written a book, but in the message that I've put in there, because I believe in the message in my book more than in everything else that comes around it. And that's why I can't wait for it to come out. Of course, I'm going to attempt to become a New York Times bestseller. So I'll do a lot of marketing and speaking and promoting. And of course, there is the part of me that wants the crown. But I think what makes me proud is the message that I have for the world.
Well, that certainly makes it a lot easier to sell, right? When you're very proud of your product.
Yes, definitely.
And did you enjoy writing it?
Yes, very much. I can't wait for it to go through all the final editing so that I'm released to start birthing the next one. I just love the process. I started associating myself with being a writer. I mean, I've lived a long enough life, so I've been an entrepreneur, a marketer, an author, and whatnot. But I think writer is the thing that I enjoy the most.
And some of your biggest challenges with it along the way?
That English is not my first or my second language. I still make a lot of mistakes, and the more I write, the more I see them. So yeah, and the more editors go through my book, the more I am conscious of them.
Okay. And if someone was, let's say someone else wanted to become an author, they looked at you and they thought, you know, I'd love to do that. What's the best advice that you could give them?
Oh God, that's you know, I love books, I love literature, but I love literature, like books which are written from the heart, not to sell. And that's the tricky thing. As a business person, as a businesswoman, I would say that if you have a message and you want to write a book, you should go for that. But as a connoisseur of literature, I would say only write if your heart is ready to write. And that would be probably very limiting for a lot of people, because not everybody is a writer at heart, but they might still have a good message, and the message probably needs to be seen and read. So I'm not a good person to inspire people to write, because I am a snob when it comes to writing and reading.
It's honest. So thank you for that. And you've mentioned the business side, Mindvalley, a couple of times, and I actually am aware of Mindvalley. So it's quite a big company. Is that right?
Well, yes.
Is there a story there that you would share?
Yeah, so we are the biggest educational platform in the area of transformation, personal growth and transformation. Of course, there are other big traditional publishers in our niche as well. We specialize on pre-recorded courses and events, and work with some of the best authors in the world. But the story is funny. I grew up and I was brought up in Soviet Union. I mean, I was born and grew up in Soviet Union, where we only valued academic and scientific knowledge, and anything which was something else, especially about how to live properly, that was frowned upon. So I remember when I was first introduced to John Gray's book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, my comment was like, what? You want me to learn how to love? No, I'm supposed to know that. So I ended up in personal growth by accident, because my then husband, he was passionate about it. And I had made my career in Estonia, in Europe, in government. And when I got married, I moved to US, and I had to reinvent myself from zero. So the best thing I figured I could do was to help my husband with his business. So I ended up in Mindvalley and in business and in personal growth in a way by accident. It wasn't my conscious choice from the very beginning. But Mindvalley was a passion story for my then husband, Vishen. Of course, in 20 years, it would be really tragic if I didn't learn to love that industry. And it is, I can't imagine my life different right now. If I think of having started my career in politics, it just horrifies me. So I did learn to love it, but it wasn't a conscious choice. And I did learn to love business. Another thing which was a taboo in Soviet Union, you would get jailed for attempting to do a business. And I discovered that these things, I love them, and I'm good in them. So yeah, sometimes you don't have to make a conscious choice. You have to just trust the process sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the Soviet Union a couple of times. I'm not that good with my history, I'm sorry to say. So I don't know a lot about the Soviet Union. I don't necessarily know what you went through there. In terms of biggest contrasts of where you are now, or the kind of freedom you have or whatever versus what you had, what would you say? What would you share with me, given the fact that I'm moderately ignorant about the topic?
I have to confess, since I learned history initially in the Soviet educating system, I didn't know the exact true history of the world, which wasn't tainted by the propaganda, Soviet propaganda. So it's fine. I mean, we all know, we all usually see the world through our own lens, through our own experience, through wherever you grew up. So it's fine. I don't find it's weird. I think the closest comparison would be North Korea, except the Soviet Union was massive. And North Korea is just a tiny country, but it was in a sense very similar, as it was very walled off from the rest of the world. Soviet Union was big, so I didn't have an impression that I was in a prison. We got to travel long distances. I think there were 12 time zones in Soviet Union, so pretty big territory. And all sorts of different climates. So I didn't have the feeling like I didn't know the world. But of course, you couldn't travel anywhere. You didn't have passports. You had internal passports which were not usable for travel abroad. And to go abroad, you had to get a permission from the government. Doing business was illegal. Everything was state planned, state produced, which also, of course, led to very weak economy and shortage of things. So you learn to go by with the small things. And I even had half a plan to write a book, a humorous book about life on planet USSR. But unfortunately, the war, Russia attacked Ukraine, the war started, and I don't feel good anymore to make this book light, because I think Soviet Union in a political terms was a huge disaster. My personal experience was probably light because I was 14 when it collapsed. It collapsed without bloodshed, at least in Estonia. So it was easy for me. But right now I see that it was a huge tragedy for a lot of people who were part of this huge empire. And I take back my humorous approach to that, but we were humans and we lived human lives, and we had our similar dreams to everyone else, but we didn't have certain things.
Well, I appreciate your answer. And it is a shame, because if you had have written the book, I might be more informed now than I am. So, there may still be a book there. You never know, right?
Yes, it was interesting. The experience was interesting. And some people, I remember I shared some things on Instagram about my weird habits. For example, I can't sit properly at a dinner table. I turn my legs to the side because we had very small apartments. So we didn't have space for dining tables. So we actually used cupboards. And since childhood, I've learned to sit with my legs outside. So, and I remember when I shared some of those stories, some of my audience actually wrote back and they're like, yes, I can relate. And obviously all those people had lived in Soviet Union. It's so strange because we have those very bizarre experiences that we all understand, but other people don't.
Well, maybe for people like me, the book still could be made. You never know.
Maybe. It depends on how the war ends.
Good point. I did ask beforehand, and you referenced it. I like to ask for everyone who comes on, what does success mean to you?
Wow. So I actually like to call the words by their own names. And since majority of society understands success in, unfortunately, financial and goal achievement terms, when I talk about success, I talk in those terms, in the terms that everybody understands. When it comes to my personal experience, I think happiness is more important than success in that sense. So I wouldn't call myself a success unless I was also content, unless I also loved myself, unless I was kind to my imperfections and failures, unless I had a meaningful life. But when I talk about success with people, I stick to the meaning that society generally gives to it, which means you have a hefty bank account and a job where you have achieved something.
It's an interesting answer, because I have had someone sort of just say, it just means happiness to me. And I think people do use it as exactly as you have said. So everyone will have their own kind of meaning of what it means, but everyone kind of uses the same definition, which is like, bank account and cars and all that stuff. So it's very interesting.
I would go further than that, because I think we should just let success be and admit that happiness is also important. Because why do we try to change the terms? I think that we often try to give success a lot of other meanings because we don't solve other problems in our lives. So sometimes when we look at the person who has a lot of money but is unhealthy, unhappy, we say they're not successful. Of course, in health terms, they're not successful because that's a success in health, which, if you add in health, it makes it kind of clear what you're talking about. But that also makes us feel better. Oh, but at least they're unhappy. So is that really about that person's success in the sense that everybody understands this word? Or is it about our perception of that person and that person's, financial success, let's say? So that's why I do like to call phenomena by their proper names, because that doesn't give you an escape. Because if I talk about myself and I say, yeah, maybe I can't afford something basic, or let's say maybe I struggle with finances, but I have a job which is meaningful, and I have audience which loves me, and I actually have a good partner, and I'm healthy, so I'm successful. No, you're not. You have succeeded in many areas of your life, but you have not succeeded financially. And let's be honest with that. So very often we are tempted to give, to muddle this term so that we feel better about ourselves. But let's leave success and admit that happiness is important. But we can't. And I've been in personal growth for a long time. And if you ask people, nobody has, I want to be happy on the goal list for the year. We think this is a fluffy, irrelevant topic. In fact, if you listen to the public discourse on happiness, people will tell you, oh, no, don't strive to be happy. Strive for a meaningful life, strive for this, strive for that, but just not to be happy. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, if you want to be healthy, you have to work on your health. If you want to have good relationships, you have to work on your relationships. Why is it if you want to be happy and everybody wants to be happy, you should not work on this? How is it going to happen out of the blue? And by the way, we all want to be happy, even if we don't admit that, because look at what do parents want for their beloved children? Happiness. What do we wish each other? Happy birthday, happy this, happy that. We want happiness. We just don't have the guts to admit that we want happiness and it is important. So we muddle the idea of success.
So
Sorry.
Can I interpret your answer as you'd prefer to be happy than successful?
Yes. But I'm successful too, by the way. And by the way, there's research, because I've looked into that. And you don't need research to know that success doesn't give you happiness. Because we've seen massively successful, whether you take finances or achievements, accomplishments, fame as success measurement. We've seen a lot of successful people who are either depressed or incredibly unhealthy or actually have killed themselves. So we all know that success doesn't bring happiness. But there's research that shows that there is connection between success and happiness. The causality goes the other way. You're much more likely to achieve success if you are doing whatever you're doing in the state of happiness. So I do value happiness above success. Yes.
Well, thank you for the answer. It's probably a more in-depth answer than I've ever gotten on the topic. So I appreciate it. Is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think I trust that whatever needed to be said was said.
Okay. Well, have you got any closing thoughts for us?
There are so many things I would like to say, and we started with self-love, and I would like to say that self-love is a prerequisite for happiness. You can't be truly happy unless if you don't love yourself, it's almost impossible to be truly happy. So I would like to say that, but since we ended up with happiness, I want to share a story, a very short story, to give you permission to actually value happiness. I remember years ago, I used to work with refugees in Malaysia because that social side of me is super strong. So on one side, I was an entrepreneur, and we were building Mindvalley, a company that teaches people to live happy, fulfilled, extraordinary lives. And on the other side, I was working with refugees in Malaysia. So I've seen on a daily basis people who had lost everything in their lives and was still unsafe. And then I had a chance to ask. We had an audience with the Dalai Lama at one of the events where Vishnu was speaking, my ex-husband. And I asked Dalai Lama this question because I was feeling torn. I asked him, how can I reconcile these two worlds? Because on one side, I see a lot of human suffering, but on the other side, I try to teach people that they should be happy. And I had such a strong, contradiction inside of me doing two things. And his answer was super simple. He said, Kristina, you can't help anyone if you're not happy. So I think it is a very important thing. Dalai Lama gave me permission to be happy. I want to pass it on to our audience. You can't help anyone if you're not happy.
You're giving people permission to be happy.
I'm giving them permission to actually prioritize their own happiness.
It's a great way to end the episode. For people who want to connect with you or maybe buy the book, where do they go?
So the best way to connect with me is Instagram, but I've been so busy lately that I don't publish as regularly as I used to, but this is completely my self-expression. It's just me writing. And my book is kristinamand.com/book. That's where, well, once it goes on sale, you'll be able to buy it there. For now, it's just pre-registering so that I can let people know when it's available to buy.
Okay, well, Kristina, I think you've been a great guest today, so thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.